it up a little bit, I think. Yeah, because I think one of your hemorrhoids is tilting you one way. Yeah, this way. Yeah. You obviously didn't get the cream.
I don't have hemorrhoids, though.
Okay. Denial is everything. See, this is where we start.
Does everybody have hemorrhoids?
Just about. But they're internal. So you need headphones.
Oh, I'm not wearing my headphones.
Yeah. So you can hear me. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, we were talking about the pills. So I've got a lot of Hondas in my practice.
Hondas.
Yeah. Not BMWs.
Hondas in your practices in your patients?
Yes, Hondas. A lot of Hondas.
A Honda, you mean reliable, sturdy, salt of the earth?
Yes.
What is a Honda?
A Honda. A Honda in my world?
Yeah. What is that an acronym for Dr. Suave?
Oh, there you go. Now you're talking my language. Suave.
Oh, I thought you meant acronym. I thought you meant acronym.
You mean Hondas. See, the issue is we've got probably close to 100 million, maybe plus Hondas. That's the number one car or acronym on the road these days.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with automobiles.
Right. This is a medical thing.
So a Honda.
Who do you call a Honda? It's a person who
is hypertensive, obese, non-compliant with their diet adult. Honda. HONDA.
So hypertensive. Oh, hypertensive.
Obese.
Hypertensive, obese.
Non-compliant.
You mean beautiful? Fat is beautiful.
For some, yes. But not for your metabolism, not for your skeletal well-being, not for your cardiac health, not for your kidney health, and certainly not for your pancreas. I mean, your pancreas, it's on its knees begging, please, help me out.
What does the pancreas even do? People lose those all the time. What do you need?
No, they don't.
What do you need a pancreas for?
No, you can't live without one.
Oh, really? It's important?
Yeah. We have a love affair with the pancreas. It's intimate. I mean, if you're a Honda, you're destroying your pancreas. Yeah. Because you're making it work a lot more than it ought to. I mean, there is overtime galore. If the pancreas were working by the hour.
The pancreas is the one that's releasing insulin?
Yes. One of the cells called a beta cell in this little island inside the pancreas called the islet of Langerhans. Not to be confused with.
The islet of Langerhans?
Yes.
All right. So the pancreas and the islet of Langerhans.
Inside the islet.
The pancreas is inside the islet.
No.
No, inside the pancreas, there's the islet.
The islands of Langerhans.
Is Langerhans the guy who discovered it?
It's like Columbus.
Right.
He ventured out. There are some, islands there. That this is my Langerhans. Yeah, and you find out it has a gusher. Like the Beverly Hills. Like hillbillies.
Right,
There
right.
it is. Right?
There's
There's golden then hills.
a story of a man named Jed. No, wait, what is it?
Yeah, that's it. The story.
Poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. That's the one.
Yeah, and they found some oil, right? So this guy found insulin.
He was hunting for some food.
Yeah.
And out of the ground
came out the insulin. Out of the beta cells.
So the
specialized neuroendocrine cells that produce insulin, right? So when you eat sugar,
it has to produce more.
Then you make more insulin. You start the mechanism by which you synthesize more insulin.
So every time I have
proinsulin, and then insulin, and it gets secreted into the bloodstream in order to engage with receptors in most cell systems.
And that tires out your pancreas, basically?
Well, if you're overworking it, right, then you are running high insulin levels at all times. So a Honda will be running, more often than not, excessive pancreatic function to increase more insulin.
Does it make them hungry?
Yes,
when
of
they're
course.
That sick?
Eventually, you do develop insulin resistance. You know why? I think I mentioned it before. Because eventually, through a series of mechanisms, if you overeat more than you're burning, especially the wrong foods, then you tend to form triglycerides, which get stored inside the cells of various organ systems, like in the liver or the muscle, for example. So that intracellular storage of long chain fatty acids, triglycerides, long chain, end up disrupting the inner mechanisms of the cellular insulin receptor concept so that the insulin cannot engage to the receptor.
Can you get rid of those triglycerides?
Eventually, yes.
Triglycerides?
Yeah, so you've got to, depending
Or
on...
triglycerides.
Triglycerides.
Both of those work.
Yeah, they work. They work. We know what it is. It's one glyceride times 3 attached with a glycerol and then long chain fatty acids.
You can reverse that.
You can, yes. And it takes, obviously, someone recognizing that you're a Honda. So a more deteriorated Honda is a hypertensive, obese, diabetic, non-compliant diabetic. So instead of non-compliant with the diet, now you've gone so far after 10, 12, 15 years, 20 years, to be a hypertensive, obese, non-compliant diabetic adult. And so those individuals, the millions that we have in the United States, probably the global burden is getting close to about between 450 and 500 million.
Worldwide,
global burden. And it's going to 700 million.
And global burden,
within 5 years.
These are people that are completely
worldwide
incapacitated.
Diabetic. No. They're walking around at various stages of their diabetic condition. Could be early. By early, I mean less than 3 years. Intermediate, 3 to 7 years.
And this is different from the kids that get diabetes.
Those are type 1 diabetics.
Right,
that's not who are we talking about.
You're talking about type 2.
In that case, on the type 1s, which is less than 5% of all diabetics, there's an autoimmune disorder whereby the immune system, again, we don't know why exactly, destroys the Langerhans islets and or beta cells inside the pancreas. So you got the pancreas, looks like a fish. Inside we have specialized tissues called the islets of Langerhans. And inside you have beta cells. Those are the ones that make the insulin. Type 1 diabetic, unfortunately.
Now what would happen? So obviously it's bad to make too much insulin. What if you eat a very, very low sugar, and you hardly make any insulin at all? Does that also have bad effects?
No, that is the healthiest type diet. The one that consumes less sugar. So if we go back to, say, 1900, the average consumption of one individual was 40 pounds of sugar per year. Okay, worldwide.
40 pounds.
Pounds per year.
Per person.
Per person. Yeah. 40 pounds.
That can't be good for you.
Well, it's not great, but at least the global burden of diabetes was less than 1% of the entire population.
Right.
Way under 1%.
It used to be rare.
Correct. Yeah.
Now it's not.
Well, that's the westernization of the world where refined sugars, the industrialization process, and anywhere the Western type of food preparation went quickly, especially to indigenous populations within 1 or 2 generations, there was a steep increase in the number of diabetic individuals because of the amount of sugar introduced into their diets. So indigenous populations that were suddenly exposed to Western type of refined sugars, white flour, table sugar, sucrose, which is 50% glucose, 50% fructose, and sweetened beverages.
I always thought fructose was good because it has the word fruck in it. It's kind of like fruit. So I was like, oh, that's the good one.
Yeah.
But it's not, right?
Not exactly. Right. Not especially from high fructose corn syrup, which is horrific. It's cheap to make, very sweet, very harmful. And in many countries, sodas, for example, have high fructose corn syrup 55. So a soda will have 55% of this horrific source of sweetness and less of the sucrose.
You know, that's the whole rumor about why they did the New Coke thing. Remember New Coke?
Yes, I remember New Coke.
Do you remember that whole fiasco?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Why do you think that happened? The cover story was that because they were losing taste tests to Pepsi.
Well, that was a cover. Fact of the matter is, there was too much sugar.
So what I heard is they went to New Coke. It was a big flop. And then they said, oh, we're bringing back regular Coke. And it was the same regular Coke, classic Coke formula, but
more high
now
fructose
it was
corn
high
syrup.
fructose corn syrup instead of sugar.
And so that started in the 80s.
Yes.
So the 1980s.
That's what happened, right? Is that what happened?
Something like that. I don't recall the exact details, but something like that. The 1980s was the worst decade in the history of nutrition in the world. That was completely a debacle because that
that was, as I recall, a Republican
I don't know about the politics
decade.
of this matter. I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it was special interests and lobbying for the sugar industry and so on. So
and the corn.
Well, and the corn, yes. And because there were subsidies, for corn. And unfortunately, some of my colleagues in the medical world were also secretly, covertly being funded by the sugar industry to do research that kept up with the hypothesis that had yet to be proven that fat, especially saturated fats, were the evil. And I think on the prior podcast, I believe we discussed a little bit about the Eisenhower heart attack, right? In September of 1955.
That's right.
At, 6 p.m.
And how that changed the heart industry.
And so that got the ball rolling to saying that red meat and saturated fats were the evil. And there were some wise people who had already been doing some research on the deleterious effect of sugar on metabolism. Because if you look at from an insurance perspective, insurance company perspective, if you want to sell someone life insurance, who would you sell it to? Would you choose a Honda? Would you choose someone who has more of a plant-based diet? Would you choose someone who already has hypertension, middle-aged, obese, and has elevated triglycerides? Or someone who has none of those?
None of those.
Correct. So they knew quickly, the insurance companies, the people who did the actuarial tables and so on, they started to realize, hey, there's a problem here.
Right.
This causes more heart attacks and strokes.
Right.
Okay. We don't know exactly why, but these conditions seem to fly together.
They didn't care why. They just saw the data of what was actually happening.
So that led in the 1950s, early 50s, to the Framingham database, where the whole town of Framingham, Massachusetts was put on a study protocol. So everyone had a history and physical, labs, what they could do, and they were limited in terms of...
Not like nowadays.
No, yeah, in terms of all of the labs, but they had a total cholesterol, for example, and sugar level, and they followed them for the rest of their lives. And so that's how we came up with the risk factors, what are called the cardiac or coronary risk factors that we use to evaluate somebody, right? So it's a systematic coronary risk estimation. It's called SCORE. You want me to say it again?
Coronary risk estimation.
Systematic coronary risk estimation.
SCORE.
SCORE, yeah.
SCRE.
SCORE. Yeah. I know you went to public school here.
Where's the O?
Got it. Coronary, C-O.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's no capital O. You use the two.
Well, this is what they came out with. So where you take the age of the individual, the sex of the individual, smoking status, blood pressure, cholesterol, those 5. And you can determine the 10-year risk of having a heart attack, sudden cardiac death, or a stroke.
So my high cholesterol, bad cholesterol was the bad risk factor. Even
that
though
was
the other
one.
4 were good.
Yeah. You don't smoke. You are male, middle age. So you had 3 bad things. Yeah, you have balls, middle age, not good.
Men just have heart attacks just for being men, right?
Yeah, well,
It is what it is.
It is what it is. So, yeah, historically, men have had a rougher time than women.
Well, we die sooner. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
you go to war and abuse your body more, and heart attacks, heart disease earlier in life. Yeah, absolutely. Estrogen protect women. There's a protective effect of female hormones. That's a biological, biology, evolution to keep, production going, right? We're a factory to some degree.
So,
but anyways, back to Framingham. So that's how we came up with the
coronary
risk factors.
Do men with higher estrogen live longer?
No, not at all.
So But I thought estrogen helps women live longer.
No. Hold on. You're conflating two different things. Yeah. In a man, the reason for a man to have more estrogen, assuming they're not injecting it or taking hormone blockers.
I'm just saying, men that live to the longest, healthiest ages.
Right.
What is their testosterone estrogen ratio, or is it irrelevant?
No, it's not irrelevant.
Okay.
The testosterone level is always higher and the estrogen number less. So, for example,
for long-lived men.
Long-lived men. Correct.
But I thought high testosterone makes men die faster.
No, that's not true.
Okay, so how does it work?
No, okay. So the reason why some men have higher levels of estrogen is because they convert it in their visceral fat. So men who look like a pear with a pendulous abdomen, that visceral fat has an enzyme called aromatase. And the normal testosterone made by the testicles, okay, from the parent molecule, which is cholesterol, that one gets converted in the visceral fat into estrogen. So men who are obese, especially with a body mass index more than 30 and certainly more severely morbidly obese more than 40, those men, those are 40 kilograms per meter squared, that's body mass index, convert their testosterone into estrogen. So prior to you losing some weight, the reason you had shrinkage, tiny appendages down there, genitals, man boobs, hips, low sex drive, libido, depression, prone to crying, was because you were converting what little testosterone you were making into estrogen. Don't you see the madness in it all? That I try to get that visceral fat off so you can all of a sudden keep your testosterone higher and lower your estrogen. And then that helps with muscle. It helps with energy.
Won't that make me go bald, though?
It depends on your genetics, because there is a relationship between the metabolites of testosterone, the one called 5-hydroxytestosterone, which is the one that's active in tissues, which can kill in susceptible individuals, hair follicles. True. So not in your case. You'll lose some, but not as much of those who have more susceptibility. So you've got to look at their family history. So the interesting part here is that when Eisenhower had the heart attack, the top nutritionist in the U.S., Ansel Keys from University of Minnesota, quickly jumped on the bandwagon because he had done some poorly designed study and presented it worldwide to see which people were dying faster from heart attacks. And so he cherry-picked the 7 countries that showed his hypothesis to be true, which was the fat consumption. The problem is those people in those studies who apparently were consuming more fats, more animal fats, they didn't report how much sugar they were also consuming.
Right.
Yeah, right? So the fact of the matter is many of the countries in the study that show the opposite of his hypothesis were excluded from the final results. But he was still Man of the Year in 1955, I believe, December. Time magazine, or I don't know if he was Man of the Year, but he was Man of the Month.
Who elevated him?
Time magazine.
No, but I mean, how did the whole study get elevated? Like, how did it all?
He was a very vociferous, aggressive doctor who had an academic platform. And so when journalists would do interviews, why did President Eisenhower have a heart attack? Oh, because he consumed a hamburger. He had too many animal fats. He's a meat eater. He has other risk factors, but the main one is that he has high cholesterol. And so we know that, red meat has fat in it. And therefore, my hypothesis, fats cause heart attacks. Now,
people still believe that.
Of course, 50, 70 years later. Now, here's the key. It's a false premise.
Because it's not just the fat itself; it's what else you eat.
Well, I'm going to share with you 2 important studies. One was called Mr. Fit.
Mr. Fit?
Yeah. So that was a study with men. It cost $500 million back at the early 80s, late 70s, 70s. $500 million back then to do the study. whereby groups of men with high cholesterol, half of them were middle-aged, were told, you're going to eat low fat, the others eat whatever you want. And then they counted dead bodies at the end of, 7 years or so. Okay?
That cost $500 million?
Yeah. You got to randomize them. You got to pay people to interview them in clinical history, take their labs, follow them every month.
Who funded this?
The NIH, the government.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what are they?
To prove the hypothesis that had been
Mr. Keys.
looming around from Ansel Keys and others in the U.S., and if you went against them, well, you wouldn't get funding for research. You would get suppress your information. The most famous nutritionist in Europe, John Yudkin, spelled with a Y, published a book in, I think, 72 or 73. So I'm jumping a little bit in time, but this is interesting. It was called, ready? Very apropos for today. Pure, White, and Deadly. And it was not about white supremacy. It was about sugar.
Black Lives Matter. That's a Black Lives Matter.
So pure, white, and deadly. That sugar was the actual cause of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease.
Obviously, anti-sugar propaganda that had to be suppressed.
Correct. So he quickly lost his position of research in Cambridge or Oxford, or no, University of London, sorry, and was discredited and maligned because the guy who took over his chair, he had been the chair of his department, I think University of London, nutrition department, was a pro-fat hypothesis advocate together with the American side. So the sugar industry was funding research, including the Harvard School of Public Health, headed by a guy named Fred Stare, S-T-A-R-E, who...
He was a dancer, right?
No, that's... Fred Astaire, he was a great dancer too. I saw.
That's what you said, Fred Astaire.
Yeah, but this one without the A at the beginning.
Oh, got it.
Astaire, yeah. And I don't think he tiptoed around with Carol Lombard or what was his other partner that he did a bunch of movies with?
Something Kelly.
No, Grace Kelly did not dance with him. No.
Gene Autry.
No, Gene Autry was singing cowboy, right? Anyways, Fred Astaire danced. We shall remember in a second. They were being really.
Mimi Rogers.
Ginger Rogers.
That's the one.
Yes.
I knew
can you
old
imagine?
person.
He was dancing forward, she was dancing backwards in heels, right? So who had it tougher? And so Fred Astaire got funding from the sugar industry to do research as well. There was the maker of Tang and Kool-Aid who donated the first, $1 million to do a brand new building at Harvard for nutrition research. Tang! Remember Tang?
Yeah, of course. So,
and Kool-Aid.
In this new building, did they do research and discover that, in fact, Tang was good for you?
Absolutely. Cereal of champions and the drink of champions.
You know what? And that was what they call unbiased research.
Correct. Just honest, down the middle. No preconceived ideas. So all that went on, but these guys made it to the FDA board that would decide the fate of sugar. So there was one other guy named Ed Bierman, I think University of Washington, who became, I guess, the head of the American Diabetic Association, who basically said, sugar has nothing to do with diabetes. You can eat as much of it as you want. In fact, I encourage my diabetics to eat a lot of sugar.
To help them balance their insulin.
Of course. So it was a question of total calories. So that was the time when they said a calorie is a calorie. So a calorie of broccoli is the same as a calorie of, say, milk chocolate.
Well, and the milk chocolate is ready energy, so it's better like if you're going to
do
something
no, absolutely.
Physical.
And, for erectile function and nitric oxide, ready to go, baby. It has no negative effect. We shall deal with that famous molecule NO in a minute, nitric oxide. But anyway, so what happened was there were 3 seminal papers in the 1980s.
That were all pro-sugar.
84, 85, 86, and 87, 88. The first, the American Diabetic Association, a paper from the FDA, from the National Academy of Science, and the last one from the Surgeon General. All 3 basically exonerating sugar, saying sugar is fine, You can have as much of it. You know, it's fine.
The facts came out. The facts came out.
By the 1980s, by the 1980s, 1990s, the average consumption of sugar was up to 90 pounds per person per year in the U.S.
90 pounds. I'm not very good at math.
Remember, it had been 40.
But that's a quarter of a pound a day.
It's a huge amount. Yeah.
A quarter of a pound of sugar a day?
Yeah, roughly a quarter. Yeah. It's a huge amount of sugar.
That's first of all, that's creating jobs for the dentistry industry.
Yes.
That's creating jobs for the
medical industry.
Yeah. And it's also making people happy, so they're less likely to be political
or to be aggressive. You mean?
Yeah, this is I think a wonderful job creating thing
strategy
for America. Yeah.
And you had the top nutritionists and influencers at the level of the American Diabetic Association, FDA,
Bill Cosby,
National Academy of Sciences. Bill Cosby probably was a great proponent of this.
Well, he was
the man,
salesman.
the father,
yeah.
The father of the nation.
He was in commercials everywhere,
selling sugar,
many different sugar.
You know what is sad is athletes today still do that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, for many companies across the board.
Gatorade, and
not only that, but soft drinks, Sprite, for example, McDonald's.
We're trying to get no sponsors, aren't we?
Well, do we have a moral obligation?
We've already attacked
with what we know today.
The corn industry and the sugar lobby, two of the most powerful forces and most vindictive on the planet.
Well, but here's the thing, we have to look at how sugar affects people from different racial backgrounds. So Western Europeans, the percent who develop diabetes, type 2 diabetes we're talking about, is about 7.5%. Whereas...
even though they're a bunch of fat...
yeah, but they come from a certain type of ancestry.
And when I say they are a bunch of fat, I mean, of course, my own family.
Yeah,
because I...
absolutely.
Yeah.
Overweight or obese, overweight or obese in the U.S. is over, 33, 34% of the population. It's
but
huge.
Not all... they're still obese and not much higher percentage diabetic.
7.5% approximately in the Caucasian population of a Western European ancestry, mostly because of the agricultural revolution about 10,000 years ago, where certain grains, wheat, animals were domesticated. So people can have sugar and fat more often.
Evolution over time, the people that couldn't handle it didn't reproduce as much, and so now we have people that can handle
Correct.
It.
They survived.
It's not ideal, but they can handle it.
Yes, long-term 10,000-year experiment, and they have adapted.
Okay.
So the enzymes in the Krebs cycle that handle both glucose and fat metabolism are aligned to help those people not store long-chain fatty acids inside the cells that disrupt the insulin receptor. It's insulin and its receptor engagement relationship. So they don't develop insulin resistance. Right. Whereas those who were hunter-gatherers from many, many countries, of course, Latin America, Native Americans, Southeast Asia, hunter-gatherers, with little exposure to excessive sugars and animal fats, their liver has not adapted over the last 200 years with those foods and high-calorie dense foods like fast foods, correct? And we in America are the highest consumers of fast food in the world.
Right.
We consume probably, I would say, a little over a third of the fast food in the world. And about 85 million people consume at least one fast food meal a day in the U.S.
Wow.
Daily.
Wow.
Yeah. High in saturated fats and sugars and other chemicals, of course.
Sodium.
Sodium, correct. Yeah. And all kinds of pesticides, insecticides, preservatives.
In the 80s, they said fat was the problem, and then for a while they said sodium was the problem.
Correct, both. Yeah.
As long as we're not looking at sugar.
Yeah, but sugar and fructose, in fact, are more deleterious than those.
I don't drink sodas anymore.
Good. Now since like a week ago?
No. It's been a while, but I had another opportunity today.
Not even diet soda. Yeah.
No, not even. No, the diet stuff scares me more.
See, this is mineral water here. It's not that I'm trying to put a plug for this brand, but it's 0 calories.
Right.
Right? And it's filling.
You got any more?
Outstanding. Yes, upstairs.
Okay, great.
Shall send
We'll have to go on
our valet to go get it
after this episode.
Yeah. So back to the thing. There was another study that close. The total spent on these two studies was $500 million. So they said, okay.
So, but the Mr. Fit said that sugar was bad.
Yeah, they didn't want to publish the data because,
and it was in the Mr. Fit that the guy wrote the sugar, the white.
Well, based on that, right? Yeah.
But the guy who had that data was
Yudkin was before in 1973.
Okay.
The Mr. Fit data came out late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
And there was another study where
and Mr. Fit said unequivocally sugar is the devil.
Mr. Fit was out to prove that fat was the devil.
Oh, and did it?
And it didn't make it. The people that were consuming less fat died quicker.
Right.
Oh, well, the reason is they had more hypertension, and the doctors weren't treating them appropriately for their hypertension, and the hypertension medications had side effects. That's why they died. That was the rationalization.
Right.
Right?
And they buried it.
Buried it. And the next study was the LRC, Lipid Research Clinic study, with an old cholesterol-lowering medication, which was called a bile acid sequestrant, called cholestyramine. Awful packages, mix it up, 4 grams, drink it 4 times a day for a couple of years. So then they said, okay, we did the study wrong. We should have picked people with high cholesterol and get them on a low-fat diet and give them this cholestyramine and follow them out. So when I was in medical school, we studied that study. And we were told, this proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that low-fat diet and cholestyramine, that give you bloating, diarrhea, made you feel like crap, decreases strokes, heart attacks, and death. It was so marginal, the difference, versus the people that keep eating whatever you want and take nothing.
Right.
Yeah, the middle-aged men. Again, they studied only white men, almost no women. Okay? So they go, the reason is we had too many men. So let's do a study with women. That was called the Women's Health Initiative. That was the next study. 20,000 women, followed for so many years. Low fat, no difference. Wow. Okay, here's the official position by the FDA. We have to lower fat consumption to every baby, infant, man, women of every age in the United States.
So they're willfully
misinterpreting and promoting a pre-established hypothesis.
And this is
based on lobby dollars. Based on funding. Wow. Got it? So all studies, negligible to no difference. And in one of them, increased mortality if you ate low fat. Dang, that was the 1980s. And so they come out all these papers by the most trusted institutions in the world. England had its voice as well. The Europeans were not silent.
England was captured by the sugar lobby from the beginning.
Yeah, so Yudkin was suppressed. The voice, one of the single lone wolves trying to educate on this, and as I said, wrote that book, White, Pure, White and Deadly. What a title.
That is an amazing title.
And so
it sounds like the prison memoirs
of some African American guys talking about
one of
the guards. Oh my God, how tragic. But anyways, so what happened was, of course, we went down the road of low fat and high carb, high sugar, and yogurts and breads and ice cream and all kinds of foods that we find on the shelf. In fact, today, 80% of anything that's canned or bagged has sugar added to it. Yeah. And then some say 0 sugar added, but they have alcohol sugars. That roughly, I don't want to generalize, but roughly they count for half. So if you buy something that says 10 grams of sugar, one portion, whatever it is, And of those, you say, okay, it has 1 gram of fiber. So take that one out. So now you have 9 grams left of sugar. And you look at the ingredients, at the nutrition label, and it says no sugar added. So what are those 9 grams? And you go look at the fine print, and it's all the sugar alcohols. So they roughly count for half.
How do they affect your body?
Shitty. They count about half as if you were taking sugar.
Okay.
So there's really 4.5 grams of actual sugar that behaves like sugar. Now,
which is forcing your pancreas to
overwork, create more insulin. And the higher the insulin, the more you store fat, the more the insulin receptor becomes dysfunctional, and you keep the fat locked in. So the higher the insulin level, okay, the more you lock in fat. So I'm going to say something a little more medical. Insulin is anti-lipolytic. Explain that back to me.
Well, those are Greek words. So lipo for fat.
Yeah.
Anti. Well, that's Greek as well.
Yeah.
Against. So it's anti-fat.
I mean, for a Mexican, you know a lot of Greek.
Lytic. I'm actually not Mexican. Most people don't know that.
I thought you're like Ted Williams.
Where people, well, I do have Native American.
Wasn't Ted Williams Mexican?
Yes. He's the greatest Mexican baseball player of all time.
He was, wasn't he? What about Babe Ruth?
That's a topic for our next podcast.
Okay.
All right. Well.
Okay. So it means the higher the insulin, the more you lock the fat in. You prevent your body from burning and breaking down the fat.
Even though your body's working to do it, it won't.
Correct.
And that's why people that have a hard time. Correct.
So when you're diabetic and you're eating incorrectly and you hypersecrete insulin, because your pancreas, those beta cells in those islets of Langerhans are working their butts off. Okay? They're producing a lot of insulin. You already have too much insulin. And the more insulin you have, the less you burn.
And does the insulin make you store fat?
Correct.
So it's a vicious cycle.
Correct.
It's like the Bible says, to those that little have been given, they'll take that away as well.
And so the liver starts to access some of that fat, stores it. You get the fatty liver. You get very high triglycerides. So that leads to what we call metabolic syndrome, which is presumably what my Hondas have, going back to the Honda.
Right.
So the metabolic syndrome, which affects roughly between 25% of the Caucasian adult population in the U.S., about 38% of the Latino population and the Native American population, and about 30% of the African American population, okay? And less than 15% of the Asian population. So metabolic syndrome is composed of 5 clinical entities: hypertension, abdominal obesity, high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol,
right,
and prediabetes or diabetes. That means elevated hemoglobin A1C. That's the test we use to measure diabetes.
The way you rattle off elevated hemoglobin A1C.
Yes.
I think that's a topic for another.
Okay. So when you have that, you die quicker.
Right. So basically,
and
to sum it up, overworked pancreas.
In Honda.
Bad.
Yeah.
Bad.
So what is my goal in life? To make you into a BMW.
To have a relaxed pancreas.
Yes. To turn you from a Honda to a BMW. Right? Honda, hypertensive, obese,
right.
non-compliant, diabetic adult, or non-compliant with your diet adult, to your best metabolic well-being. Honda to BMW.
All right. Well,
that's the leverage.
The leverage.
If you can gain leverage over your health, you write your destiny. You are the architect of your Honda.
Well, you don't want to be a Honda anymore.
No, you want to be a BMW. You are the architect of your BMW.
All right, great. This has been the Leverage Podcast. Once again, I'm Davio.
I want to see if you're listening.
And this is our host, Dr. Suave.
Till next time.
Bye-bye. Let's watch this game.
How are we doing? Can we get a little break? Go to the bathroom?